Now, Manu, thank you so much for talking about warrior women, and I will start straight with a question that has been inside me ever since I have read the story. But I have to tell you, I'm not a very keen reader on fiction. I generally like to read non-fiction or maybe just a little more serious books. But this one, when I started reading this book, I was so captivated by the story. Not just because it's been beautifully written, but because it's been so well researched as well, and because the author here has beautifully characterized every character, and there are a lot. So tell us first, Raphael, the women characters, the protagonist in your story. I mean, Manu just spoke about warrior women, and when I was reading it, being a warrior woman myself, I felt that you have justified the role of a woman in a society, and it's very uncommon. It's historical fiction, and usually in historical fiction, the role of women is very, very stereotyped. You will only see them as princes and queens who are quietly supporting their warrior kings, but here we have a very strong protagonist. And I want to ask Raphael, what was the reason behind it? And thank you so much first for doing that.
Well, I didn't do it for that reason, but it's quite obvious, as Manu was saying, not just in our culture, but I mean, women, obviously, they represent 50% of the population of the world. And having been there on both occasions, I've seen my, darling wife give birth. And so every woman's a warrior, as far as I'm concerned, that can do that has to go through that. And after all, where do great men come from? We come from women, And in our culture, there are very, very many examples of strong people, strong women, that have had to pick up the fight and fight against adversity, fight against stigma, fight against prejudice. So for me, it was a non-starter. I'm happy to say that I come from a family of strong women. My mother's very strong, her mother was very strong, her sisters. And as I said, I've learned how strong my wife is and has become. It's obviously, it is more of a struggle at times. It has been throughout history, so that was part of it. That was always swimming around in the back of my head.
And did you always think that you will start with the historical fiction? Because it's a very unusual choice to make for a debut writer, to start with a book as you just did. It's got 464 pages, but they are very, very entertaining, so do pick up the book to read. But did you always think that you will start with this?
I think, generally speaking, the Indian culture has been underrepresented outside of India, Bollywood, now even in southern India and Pakistan. The Asian culture needs to be... that wasn't my aim, but having an interest in the subcontinental history, it's very, very rich. There's no doubt about it. I mean, our civilization is amongst the oldest on the planet. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So just to try and bring that in a way, in a fictional manner, to people's notice, that, I suppose, these ideas had been swimming around in my head from when I was quite young. So that was the motivation behind that. I thought there's a lot to tell, and we need, I think Simon said earlier, he mentioned Bruce Lee wanting to be the first Asian superstar. Well, I think, not that our actors and actresses and our storytellers from the subcontinent haven't already done this, but I thought I could contribute towards that, to bringing our culture into the mainstream, and this was my path towards doing that, I hope.
So when did the idea of this book sprout? You say it's been since years, and did I hear it right? Since his childhood?
Yeah. Pretty much since I was in my teens, there were ideas formulating in my head, and I thought I'd put pen to paper. I actually started writing when I was in my early 20s, and then got married, had kids, business, etc. Life happened, and I put it on the back burner then. My business life came to an end 6-7 years ago, and I thought, well, no time like the present. So I thought, I've got to do this. These sort of ideas were the ones that I thought, why not, let's give it a go. So there's a process of going through it. Characters came, characters went, but those that remained are those that now appear on the page.
Beautiful. And having so many characters, did you lose sight of what you were writing at some point? Because that was one of the things we discussed as we were putting this book together, that you need a character list before the book because there's so many characters. And the beauty of every character is that even though each has a defined role, because it's been set in a palatial setting, so they are soldiers and they are warriors, but you went right deep into the psychology. You told us why they are doing this, why that fight is happening, and especially your main character, Holasiyan. I mean, he's a character who can't talk, but at no point did I see you displaying that self-pity through him. All I could see was that he was a warrior. So how did you manage that? How did you achieve creating such strong characters? What was there research?
Once again, our culture is replete with strong characters, all the way from the Hindu gods through to, I'm from Punjab, Sikhs and what have you. So I wanted to bring something like that onto the page. The fact that he can't speak is, I thought one way to make him stand out was by making him mute, and therefore I believe the interaction between him and Meena are therefore that much richer for the fact that he can't actually speak, but he and all those around him, they can communicate via sign language. And so it was important to me that those gestures, I believe they call it in writing, showing, not telling. So to portray the ability of the characters to be able to interact with one another without the ability necessarily to speak directly. I thought there was a richness to that, and that's just how it happened.
We also had the first session of our whole festival here was dedicated to diversity in storytelling. And I want to understand, while you were writing this book, because it may have taken years, I can imagine writing a story of this length, was there ever a self-doubt? Did you look out for role models that you could be inspired by, or did you think that they weren't enough? And did that bring an element of self-doubt, that were you doing the right thing by investing so much time in this?
I've had role models as far as people I've looked up to. As I said, we spoke about family, my mum, my grandmother. I've also had people, I have a background in martial arts, so I've had people that have to taught me how to make the best out of myself, I suppose you could say. And therefore, to try and bring a mentor, mentors are so pivotal in any young man's life, in any person's life in general, boy or girl, to be honest. And if you get the right person to give you that push in the right direction, to hold your hand when you're lost, at times when your elders aren't available for you, it's invaluable. So in some way, it's a tribute to these sort of people. In our culture, we call them gurus. People who teach you. Teaching is something that is underrated in any aspect across any walk of life. And those that can impart an amount of knowledge to you that can bring something out of you, these are the real heroes. And so the book, I suppose, again, is a tribute to people like that in my life.
Tribute to legends, that you say. And the title itself is quite powerful. And I also want to understand about writer's block. Did you ever face any? Was there ever a time when you thought that this is it, I need to take a breather, I need to take a break? Because there might be many people here who have started many stories, as many of us do. We start a story, but then we don't finish it. And we think that this is not for us. So how did you counter that? Or was there any, or did you just continuously wrote?
There was a point where the book was becoming like a popular Hollywood film, and I thought, you are going to be regarded as the biggest rip-off in history. So I'd gone quite far down that rabbit hole, I'm afraid. So I took a step back and had to walk around the garden for a few hours. And that was definitely a situation that occurred, and about 100 pages were ripped up and burnt unceremoniously in the garden. I went back, sat 100%. There were also times where I'm falling asleep with a post-it note pad next to my bed, and I've leant over, and I thought post notepad's not enough, so I've run downstairs. And in fact, actually, the one poem that appears in the book was written on a post-it notepad. So yeah, it's for me. Whenever you can, these days we have phones, but have a pen and a piece of paper handy. You can't go wrong.
So these are the stories behind the scenes stories of authors, which, you know, the front looks really glamorous, but there is a lot of work that goes behind. And Raphael, is there any section of the book that is your favorite? I know that's a wrong question to ask any author. You are in love with all your characters and every page that you've written. But is there anything that you would like to read out? Any section of it? Would you like to read out? Yes.
So this passage takes place, as you've seen in the video. Meena, the young princess, has lost her friend, and in the process of him protecting her from people with evil intent, Meena screamed out his name, sitting upright in bed. She panted heavily, unaware of where she was. Her mother tried to calm her, but was unable to keep her hold. The ladies in waiting rushed to the bed in an attempt to aid the queen. Meena continued to call for Holasiyan. I had the most terrible nightmare, mother. Nana took her in her arms. It was terrifying. She continued to pant and cry. Her mother consoled her, but Meena was still extremely disturbed. She explained what had happened in her dream. The queen hugged her and stroked her face. Then Meena asked the question her mother had dreaded to hear. Where is Holasiyan? Before the queen could respond, Meena grimaced, grasping her leg and letting out an agonized groan. She threw aside her bedclothes and looked down. A spot of blood had seeped through the bandage around her thigh. She pressed it gently with her finger. With a sharp intake of breath, her face contorted again. The pain was excruciating. Reality dawned upon her. It hadn't just been a horrific dream. She had been there, and it had indeed transpired. With eyes full of tears, she turned to her mother to ask once more after Holasiyan. The queen began to cry. Unable to look at her daughter, she averted her gaze. Meena looked around the faces of the women in the room. None were able to meet her eyes. Instead, they looked down at their feet, hands folded in front of them. Some were crying. Meena pulled her mother's face gently towards her. Mama? Her mother closed her eyes, shedding more tears. Meena scrambled to the end of her bed. She stood up in only her blouse and hobbled to the door. Her mother ran behind her, but Meena pushed her away and stepped outside. Her leg throbbed with pain, but she struggled on, determined to leave the room. Soon she was skipping at considerable speed, supporting herself against the walls. The guards saw the queen emerge behind her and tried to help. The princess brushed them aside. She rounded a corner, striding tentatively, then began to run outright. Her leg ached. She shrieked in agony, but she ran and ran. Nobody could stop her. She got to Aya's room and burst through the doors. Aya was standing by her curtains, looking forlornly out across the meadows to the mountains. Her eyes were red and her hair was undone. Aya! Meena fell into her arms and onto the ground. Aya knelt down and held her, close to bursting into tears herself. Aya, they let them take him. Sobbing as she spoke, Meena repeated the sentence again and again. The queen got to the room to see her daughter in a heap on the floor, being consoled by Aya. She leaned against the door. Pressing her hands against it, she cried some more. The princess was inconsolable. The king had walked to his daughter's room to see how she was. Upon finding it empty, he was told by the women what had happened. He ran to Aya's room. Dilawar Khan was performing his rounds. He was on the ramparts with Ajay and saw the commotion from a distance. Seeing the king run, he bounded upwards towards a palace in concern. Ajay hurried behind him. The three men reached Aya's room together and ran in. The king rushed to his daughter. The captain and Ajay stopped immediately upon entering. Identifying the cause of the misery took no effort whatsoever. It was laid out in front of them. The king tried to hold his daughter, but she pushed him away. Still in Aya's arms, she demanded answers of him. Aya held her close, looking only down. Where is he, father? Where is he? The king was silent. To his shame, he too could stare only at the floor. Look at me, father. Where is he? Tell me. Where did you leave him? I had to leave him, Meena. He held out his hands, desperate to hold his beloved daughter. I had no choice. How could you, father? How could you have done such a thing? We had no choice. There was nothing we could have done. Meena turned to the captain. Why did you leave him, captain? Why did you not fight for him? Dilawar Khan, much like the king, was staring downwards, utterly ashamed of himself. He nevertheless lifted his head and looked at his princess in the face. His eyes were red. He tried to speak, but was incapable. As duty had bound him to inaction on the prairie, had now restrained his tongue. Aya glanced up at the Dilawar Khan, cognizant of the struggle unfolding within him, tears pouring down her face. Meena turned her gaze once more to her father. You should have fought for him, father. You should have fought for him like he fought for me, like his father fought for you. Her words fell upon his ears with devastating impact. The whole room was stunned. All were completely mortified, especially the king. None present had a worthy response. Is that all you have to say, father? Try as he might, the king was incapable of answering her. His daughter's scathing words tore at his heart. As always, it hurt, even if they contained only a sliver of truth. For Meena, however, there was no equivocation. Her world was unadulterated and uncorrupted in its simplicity, that of a young woman in love, struggling to come to terms with her loss. She stared at her father, expecting him to say something, anything at all. But there was nothing he could say that would satisfy her. The last of a long line of valiant warriors who had served with distinction and without question had yet again put his life on the line for the king's daughter, and the only reward she felt the king had bestowed was abandonment.
I know that scene, so I can tell you it's a beautiful scene, and I know what context, but I won't give you the spoilers. But I think it's beautifully written, and while you have this art of describing scenes almost as if you're looking at them, especially the warrior scenes. But I want to ask you today here, as we launch your book, what is your expectations? What is it that you want to tell readers? Because as an author, what is it that the message do you want to give out?
I suppose I'd encourage anybody out there to read. I think we should read far more than we do. I'm an avid reader. I read fiction and I read non-fiction. And as I say, our culture is, the culture of the subcontinent is so rich. There is so much to tell. There are so many stories to tell. And honestly speaking, I couldn't think of a better setting in which to set my story in something that had so many facets, that was so multi-layered and very colourful. Our culture, as you know, is extremely colourful. Music, history, the whole works. So this was, in some way, in some form, I'd like to bring a bit more recognition. As I said, we're not just singers and dancers. You know, there's a lot more to our culture than perhaps some people are as of yet unaware of.
True. And this book is now available. It's going to be launched today, and we are very, very glad to say that we have partnered with and made collaborations in India, which is a very growing market for readers. And Raphael's book is going to be available there. It's going to be available in Waterstones and all the major bookstores in the UK. So if you're around, do ask for this book, The Captain of Legends. And let's promote more diversity. Let's play our role in promoting diversity. It's not just the writers and authors who have to do their job. It's not just the publishers who have to do their job. It's also the reader. You have to make that choice of reading these stories, which are rich in culture and beautifully expressed. And I can assure you, this is one book that you must pick for your Christmas holiday season. Definitely a good read. So congratulations to Raphael, and can I have Monica, and can we have your wife here actually to hold the book so we can just launch it officially?
Meena is a young lady on the verge of adulthood, but she is also the princess, sole heir to her father's kingdom. Her best and oldest friend, Holasiyan, has grown up with her in the Saffron Palace. Under the eyes of all around them, their friendship blossoms into something far greater. Yet he is destined to take his place amongst the king's fighting elite, as generations of his family have done. No one doubts that one day soon he will become their captain. When dark forces emerge and threaten Meena's life, Holasiyan sacrifices himself, standing in harm's way to protect his beloved. His selfless actions lead to a cascade of events unfolding. New friendships take shape, old alliances reform, forgotten grievances re-emerge with the revelation of a dark secret and an oath sworn under duress. The Captains of Legend, Raphael Sohn's debut.